This is the video about the Renaissance period. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to my channel. We'll talk about the history of English literature, and in this video we'll only discuss the Renaissance period. So the basic definition of Renaissance is the rebirth of art and literature. It even says that, don't make me repeat myself, this is what history says. So these are the sculptures of Renaissance era, and these are few of the portraits of the Renaissance period. So the death of Chaucer in 1400s, Renaissance era is also known as the Elizabethan era because Queen Elizabeth ruled over England by that time, and it is known as Renaissance era because art flourished a lot that time. So in the 15th century there was no unique literature, and in Europe Renaissance was spreading. So in England too it came as the first printing press was introduced. And after the death of Chaucer in 1400s, 15th century is known to be barren in case of literature, talking about literature. And in the 15th century, literature was more of a desert. The main cause was the rise of civil war and to further decide who would take over the charge of the ruling. So now the England got stable, and by this time Europe Renaissance era was flourishing. Now it was the time of England. The word Renaissance means intellectual rebirth or the rebirth of literature. So back then church was powerful, and now the situation or the terms and conditions in people's life got a bit relaxed and stabilized. So by this time the word humanism got into the limelight. Now the word humanism, what do you mean by it? The main idea of humanism is that to give importance to humans rather than the concepts or the terms and conditions of the priests in the church. उस टाइम पे कैथोलिकिज़्म और प्रोटेस्टेंटिज़्म बहुत ज़्यादा लाइमलाइट में थे इससे पहले, और कैथोलिक काफ़ी ज़्यादा स्ट्रिक्ट टर्म्स एंड कंडीशंस रखता था, वेरस प्रोटेस्टेंट्स थोड़ा सा लीनियंट थे। तो इसके बाद हर चीज़ जो प्रीस्ट बोलता था, जैसे हमारे इधर मौलवी होते हैं वो कुछ बोलते हैं, देन वी हैव टू एग्री विद इट। सो एट दैट टाइम उधर प्रीस्ट बोलते थे और उधर के लोग उनको एग्री या एक्सेप्ट करते थे उनके टर्म्स एंड कंडीशंस को। तो उस टाइम पे फिर द वर्ड ह्यूमनिज़म केम इनटू बीइंग, एंड ये जो है फर्स्ट जिस इंसान ने या फेमस पोइट ने बोला था, हिज नेम इज़ फ्रांसिस्को पेट्रार्क. So it basically means that the importance would be given to humans rather than priests working in a church. So this Francisco Petrarch was an Italian poet, and because of his writing he is known to be the father of humanism. It was Italy where Renaissance era got flourished. In 1453 Turkish people captured the conquest of Constantinople. Constantinople is the was the wealthiest city in Europe in 15th century, and therefore a lot of Greek scholars went to Italy, and later on Italian cities became known to be the hub of Greek studies. So, Petrarch, through his writing, explained the in depth meaning of humanism, as even before in Greek it was vital and was given importance back then. So, as in this era, humanism should be important in today's world too, because at this time Italy became a teacher of the whole of Europe, since Italy got lots of literature and the rebirth of art, philosophy, and in classics too. So countries like Spain and Portugal got influenced and sent Columbus to America, Vasco da Gama to Africa, and Germany was contributing in terms of printing. प्रिंटिंग प्रेस इन्वेंट हुआ था, वो आम हो गया था, इसीलिए राइटिंग्स जो है मैन्यूस्क्रिप्ट में नहीं इतनी लिखी जाती थी। जस्ट एक ओरिजिनल फॉर्म मैन्यूस्क्रिप्ट में सेफ रखा जाता था, बाकी सब जो है प्रिंटिंग के थ्रू कॉपीज़ बनाई जाती थी। इन 1570 मार्टिन लूथर posted a copy to attack the power of Pope, and since Europe was in a difficult arena of rebirth of literature, और उस टाइम पे इंग्लैंड जो है बहुत बैकवर्ड था बिकॉज ऑफ द सिविल वॉर इफ़ेक्ट्स, जो कि आफ्टर इफ़ेक्ट्स होते हैं वॉर के, एंड कंट्रीज लाइक इटली एंड फ्रांस वर टू एडवांस बैक देन. England, by the time of Henry VII, Renaissance touched the ground of England, and then William Caxton, who was the first painter and who introduced the printing press in England. There were two scholars, विलियम क्रूसीन एंड थॉमस लिनार्क. तो ये दो स्कॉलर्स इटली गए और इन लोगों ने बहुत काम किया लिटरेचर पे, और जब ये वापस आए अपॉन देयर अराइवल दे मेड ऑक्सफोर्ड द होम ऑफ ग्रीक स्टडीज़. जो ऑक्सफोर्ड इंस्टीट्यूट है तो वो जो है होम ऑफ ग्रीक स्टडीज़ बन गया था. एंड इवन इन ऑक्सफोर्ड द ग्रीक स्टडीज़ वाज इंट्रोड्यूस सो दैट द यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ ऑक्सफोर्ड कुड गेट द वर्ल्ड वाइड रिकग्निशन, और अभी तक ऑक्सफोर्ड का बहुत इम्पोर्टेंस है. So then a Dutch scholar, Erasmus, studied Greek from Oxford and labeled English as the hub of Greek. तो इरास्मस के दो क्लोज फ्रेंड्स थे, उनका नाम था जॉन कॉलेट एंड थॉमस मूर. So the three of them played vital role in developing the early Renaissance era. So John Colet developed public school system in England. Erasmus wrote The Institution of Christian Prince to develop an insight of how a ruler should be. And Thomas More wrote a book that was Utopia. Utopia का मतलब है कि idealistic world. So the three of them wanted reforms in church, and Thomas More was a chancellor in the court of Henry VIII. So Henry VIII wanted to have a separate ground and declared to be the supreme of church instead of pope. At this time, Thomas More wasn't happy and opposed it. Therefore, he was executed. उसको मार दिया गया था. And in the enhancement and development of culture and education, a famous person, Roger Ascham, was also the tutor of Queen Elizabeth I, who wrote two essays and always believed that English writing is best compared to Latin, since due to the fact that English is easy in terms of writing and comprehension. Thomas More and Roger Ascham are known to be the writers of aristocrats. ये दो वो राइटर्स थे जो जस्ट इलीट क्लास के लिए लिखते थे लिटरेचर. सो थॉमस वॉट एंड अर्ल ऑफ सरे, another two a great poet, they played a great role in the development of English literature. तो थॉमस वॉट ने पेट्रार्क को कॉपी किया और अर्ल ऑफ सरे ने इटालियन पोइट्स को कॉपी किया, और इन लोगों ने मिल के ब्लैंक वर्स की को इंट्रोड्यूस किया. ब्लैंक वर्स वो होता है जिसमें कोई राइम एंड मीटर नहीं होता, एंड वो ऐसे ही लिखा जाता है प्रोज स्टाइल में, बट होता पोएम है. By the time of Henry VIII, printing press became common, but still works were kept safe in manuscripts. So as the demand of people grew, publishers thought of publishing different works of different authors, and they arranged a collection of Thomas Watt and Earl of Surrey, which later on known to be Tottle's Miscellany. Another book got published which was known as the Mirror of Magistrates. Other important authors, Thomas Suckwell and Thomas Norton, wrote a work in collaboration known as Gorboduc, also known to be the first tragic novel of English literature. So in 1558, Queen Elizabeth I became the Queen of England, but before Elizabeth, Mary and Edward ruled over England, and at that time it was considered to begin a civil war and a religious war. But Queen Elizabeth came in ruling and managed the affairs. The beginning of Queen Elizabeth literature was too artificial or aesthetic, and at that time non dramatic literature was poetry. John Lyly and Philip Sidney. So John Lyly was known to be the clever poet and wrote Euphues, also known as Anatomy of Wits, which describes love, education, religion, manners, and he also used artificial language. Philip Sidney wrote a prose that was too difficult to comprehend, and Sidney used to be too much involved in politics and literature and used to write for friends and family rather than public. Sidney's popular book was The Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia. A pamphlet was published in the time of Philip Sidney, The School of Abuse. So Sidney gave a reply of that pamphlet by writing The Defense of Poesy in 1581. So this work marks the time when it was counted in the domain of English criticism. Ben Jonson, John Dryden, Alexander Pope, T.S. Eliot, Matthew Arnold, and all of these poets worked for English criticism. So, Edward Spencer, one of the important poet of this time, wrote Fairy Queen, which got popularity after some time, and he spent his life in Lord Cambridge and Ireland and died in a poor state. There's another writer, Christopher Marlowe, who wrote a poem, Hero and Leander, but as he got murdered, couldn't complete it. Later on, George Chapman completed his work. Two long poems, Hero and Leander and Fairy Queen, read a lot throughout this time. And one of the important work of Christopher Marlowe was Dr. Faustus. So this was all about Renaissance era. This was all I can share it with you guys, all of my knowledge. And thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe and share my channel as much as you can. Help me reach my goal, and meet you guys in the next video. Till then, take care. Allah Hafiz.